Now, I had resisted every temptation today, and they came from the BBC, from Channel 4, from ITV, from the Independent Radio Network, from newspapers by the score, to comment on the demise of the late Christopher Hitchens. I told them all what I told you at the beginning of the show, that I was religiously disinclined to speak ill of the recently dead. However, it was yesterday now that he died, and, moreover, I find myself traduced by inference in many, indeed most, of the extraordinary secular canonization of the late Mr. Hitchens in the mass media today. It tells you, I suppose, some of what you need to know, that the most moved, you know that voice, catching with emotion, the most moved eulogizer on the TV today has been Mr. Tony Blair, who was really very moved at the demise of Christopher Hitchens. And I dare say that George W. Bush, whose election as president the late Mr. Hitchens so enthusiastically supported, was equally moved. I suppose the warmongers who killed 1 million souls, 1 million souls in Iraq, were equally moved at the demise of one of the most polished and erudite and eloquent cheerleaders for their murderous escapade. But I can't be moved, you see. It's not that I think that Christopher Hitchens was not a good writer. He was a good writer. It's not that I think he was not a good debater. He was. As a DVD that I'll shortly be releasing with commentary and with an update on my grapple in the apple with the late Mr. Hitchens in Baruch College, which took place some years ago now, but which I think is evergreen, in which, like two prize fighters, we slugged it out under the banner of democracy now over what seemed like several hours. I'll be releasing a DVD of that, and in part, of course, it will be a tribute to Hitchens' erudition and his eloquence. It's not that I don't think he ever wrote or said or did good things. I do. As I said to him that night, in the grapple, in the apple, that he wrote like an angel. The problem is that he was now working for the devil. I told him that he was really quite a natural phenomenon. He was the only recorded case in biological history of a butterfly metamorphosing back into a slug. He was a man who placed himself at the forefront of the intellectual case for a war which murdered 1 million people. It doesn't get much more serious than that, you see, and I just cannot forgive that. I can't forget that and praise his witty little ditties, or praise his short stories, or praise his precision as a polemicist. I'm sorry. He used the gifts that God gave him to proselytize for the devil, for the satanic objective of the mass killing of 1 million people in Iraq. He used the gifts that God gave him to defend George W. Bush and Barbara Bush. Check it out on YouTube in his debate with me. To defend George W. Bush's handling of the Katrina hurricane and the Katrina hurricane debacle, which saw dead bodies, most of them black, still floating in the streets of New Orleans, weeks after the hurricane had hit. He campaigned for George W. Bush's re-election as president, and yet these so-called liberal journalists queuing up to canonize him today, well, that speaks volumes about them as much as about him. He was a militant atheist, but being an American by choice, he made a rather significant decision in his best-selling book, God Is Not Great, not to call his book, Our Father Is Not in Heaven. That would have been the obvious thing to call it in a country filled with Christian fundamentalist fanatics, but he didn't call it that. He didn't aim it at the Christians. He didn't entitle it, Our Father Is Not in Heaven. He entitled it, God Is Not Great. Why do you think he did that? He did that because that was a dagger into the heart of the Muslims. Talk about a liberty in America, in the Bush era, in the era of the neocons, to publish a book having another kick at the Muslims. That's brave, isn't it? Well, I hope that he now knows that God is great. I hope that he now knows that God is merciful. I hope God has mercy on his soul. I hope he rests in peace, even if he doesn't deserve it. One of our legends, Tarek in Notting Hill. Tarek, go ahead.
Hello there, George.
Hi.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One was about Christopher Hitchens, and I don't agree with you that he was that good a writer, actually.
I said good, not great.
Yeah, no, I find a lot of his stuff, I've read quite a bit. I've always found it rather a bombastic slapdash and badly written first draft. And the one thing I find worse than his support for the war was his self-delusional belief, as expressed in his autobiography, that he played a key part in influencing the Bush administration into going to war. I mean, I don't know whether you remember that bit in his...
Yes, of course I do, yeah.
You know, how self-aggrandizing can you be?
I'm taking him at his own words.
Yeah. And the other thing is this 17th of December is the first anniversary of the day, a year ago today, some Portuguese inventor set himself alight. And we know what happened after that over the last year, how, 3 regimes have gone and several more will follow, and it just puts a lie to the idea put forward by Bush and his supporters like Christopher Hitchens that the Middle East needs American bombs and warplanes to, achieve self-rule and democracy.
What a fantastic, succinct set of points. Thanks for that.